In today's video, I'm going to talk about false narratives and how that's different from differing perspectives, and finally cognitive distortion and why it's important to differentiate between these three. Before I get started today, I just wanted to remind you that if you like this video, please hit the thumbs up and/or subscribe, and of course comments are always welcome. What people generally mean by false narrative is simply a story that is not true. If you look up false narrative, you'll find two definitions. One is just an untrue story, and two, you'll see something like a lie or a deceit. And so I'm not referring to the deceit or lie. I'm just saying an untrue story. So an example, let's say you go over to your friend's house and your friend has just gotten some disturbing news about a relative or something, and they're just distracted. And you go over to their house and you interpret that distraction as they don't like you anymore. So you've invented this story that your friend doesn't like you. And it's just a story. It might be true, it might be untrue. But in this example, let's say that that's not true. So your friend is just distracted and they're just thinking about other things. And so during the visit, it's nothing about them not liking you, but you've invented that story in your head. And that's what I mean by a false narrative. And that's different from differing perspectives. Differing perspectives, let's imagine a candidate walks into a job interview. And that candidate, throughout the job interview, they think, wow, this is going well, it couldn't be better. And they feel really good about the interview. And then on the other side of it, the interviewer just feels like, okay, this person's a great person, but they're not a good fit for the job. And so they both have differing perspectives of the same event. So the candidate thought the interview went well. They think they're going to get a call back for another round of interviews. The interviewer thinks, nope, this isn't the right candidate, so let's not proceed. So that's differing perspectives. And in that case, the reality might be somewhere in between, but different perspectives of the same event. And in that case, to bring it back to a false narrative, let's say that the interviewer in that case, they really liked the person, but they just didn't quite have the right job qualifications. So the candidate, when they don't get a call back, they might think, oh, maybe it's my race or my religion, or maybe they didn't like how I looked. You know, they might create this story that's false, that's incorrect. It's a story that's untrue or a false narrative. So they think something else happened that caused the interviewer to not ask them back. So that's why it's important to differentiate between different perspectives and false narratives. And finally, there's something called cognitive distortion. So cognitive distortion is very common with people with hoarding disorder. Cognitive distortion, an example would be a hoarder buys an old bicycle that's in okay shape, and let's say they spend $100 on that bicycle. And then they store it outside in the weather for 10 years. And during that time, all the parts rust together and the paint fades. And so basically the bicycle is now worth possibly nothing. If you've ever repaired a bike, you know that you can quickly spend more than the bike is worth to repair it. And if things have rusted together and the paint's damaged, it's actually cheaper just to buy a brand new bike. And you can probably buy a better bike than this old bike that it's going to cost you more money to fix up, and then you're stuck with this bike that you don't really like. So cognitive distortion is that hoarder thinks, oh, I spent $100 on this bicycle, so it's worth at least $100 still. I should get that value out. Another form of cognitive distortion would be, oh, with just a little elbow grease, I can fix this bike back up good as new. But the reality is it's going to cost a lot of money to fix that bike, and you're probably not ever going to get that $100 value out. Of course, there are exceptions. If it's an antique bike, like an old Schwinn, then maybe it actually gains value even with rusting, but those are the exceptions, not the norms. So in the case of just a cheap bicycle that you bought for $100, you sit it in the elements for 10 years, and it basically has issues at that point, it's lost most, if not all, of its value. But cognitive distortion would allow a hoarder to think it still has value. Hoarders also very much struggle with false narratives. One thing I find with people who have different forms of mental illnesses, including hoarding disorder, is they create these stories that are not true And what I see is the stories they create in their head are often worse than reality. So the example I gave where you visit a friend and the friend is just distracted because of something happening in their own life, you create this story that, oh, this friend no longer likes me. That is a false narrative that's also damaging because you're thinking that a friend no longer likes you, and that's not a very healthy story to tell yourself. It just doesn't benefit anyone. It certainly doesn't benefit your friend, because then they wonder, why did you stop visiting them? And it doesn't help you because you think you've lost a friend, when in reality it was just something else entirely. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, because I've had several people comment on how when I talk about false narratives, they think I'm insulting someone, which I'm absolutely not. When I say false narrative, I simply mean someone's making up a story in their head that is untrue. There's nothing deceitful about it or a lie. It's just an untrue story. And typically, we can tell ourselves false narratives that are positive. We could say something like, all my friends love me, which may or may not be true. That's a false narrative, possibly, if it's not true. But maybe that's a little bit healthier of a narrative to have, versus a narrative, let's say you go to a party with all your friends and for different reasons, someone stops talking to you because they need to go to use the bathroom. But you think, oh, they stopped talking to me because they don't like me. So you've created this false narrative, and it's worse than reality. So I just wanted to provide some feedback as to what I'm talking about when I use the term false narrative and when I use the term cognitive distortion. It's not an insult, it's just an observation about certain aspects of mental illnesses, especially people with hoarding disorder. Thank you very much for your time. Again, if you like this video, please hit the like button, and any comments are always welcome. It really helps me understand what my audience is interested in. Thank you very much.